Committee will now have under consideration House Bill 250. Mr. Ripley.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate somebody turning this mic on this time, so don't have technology defeating me. I would like to start, Mr. Chairman, with an explanation briefly of how we got here. House Bill 154 was enacted by the legislature in 2015. The law took effect in July 1st of 2015. Planned Parenthood filed a lawsuit against the state of Idaho in December of 2015. Sometime during the winter of 2016, they requested a preliminary injunction preventing the further enforcement of the telemed abortion ban. Rather than fight the preliminary injunction, the Attorney General entered into an agreement with Planned Parenthood saying that they would not enforce the ban on telemed abortions for the duration of the lawsuit. So effectively, telemed abortions became legal in Idaho as of April 2016. The Attorney General's office entered into another agreement with Planned Parenthood in late December of 2016. The parties agreed on the critical factual record before the federal court. On the basis of that stipulated facts document, we believe that it is virtually impossible for the state to win at the trial court level or to prevail on any appeal, regardless of how many new justices are appointed to the Supreme Court or the federal bench. The court record at this point provides virtually no defense or justification for the statute. Hence, the pro-life community comes before this committee to ask that we moot the lawsuit before any further or greater damage is done. I would like to focus some attention on Section 1 of the legislation. And Mr. Chairman, I ask permission to submit 3 documents into the committee record. The minutes from the House State Affairs Committee from February 23rd, 2015. The minutes from the Senate State Affairs Committee from March 16th, 2015. And a memo from Ms. Millie Smith, Staff Counsel for Americans United for Life. This memo from Ms. Smith was submitted by me into evidence before this committee during the February 2015 hearing on House Bill 154. It is but one of many documents submitted to this committee explaining the medical necessity of banning telemed abortions. A review of the committee minutes shows that a number of persons testified on legal and medical issues associated with performing abortions over an internet connection. It is highly significant, Mr. Chairman, that none of that testimony and evidence is reflected in the stipulated facts now before the federal district court. We put quite a lot of effort into Section 1 of this bill. We thought it was important to defend the honor and diligence of this committee and the legislature when it chose to enact House Bill 154. Those first 9 points are but some of the facts entered into the record during legislative hearings back in 2015. It is my sad duty, Mr. Chairman, to ask this committee to support House Bill 250 in order to preserve our options going forward. Make no mistake, I believe that I speak for the pro-life community in saying that telemed abortions is a terrible tragedy for Idaho, babies and women included. It is a terrible way to treat women and girls in crisis. It will lead to higher abortion rates in the state. And I would like to make it clear that it is my intention to return to this issue at the earliest opportunity. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions and ask for the committee's support of this bill.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ripley. My question is, I have two questions, but my first question is, will this bill include taxpayer funding for these types of abortions?
Mr. Chairman,
Ripley.
Representative, no.
Follow up?
Representative Scott.
This is another easy yes/no question. Do you believe that by passing this bill that we are putting women and girls at a higher risk?
Mr. Ripley.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Scott. I don't think there's any doubt that the legalization of telemed abortions is going to lead to increased health consequences, potentially even fatal health consequences for women and girls in the state of Idaho.
Thank you.
I don't think there's any doubt that we're going to see increased abortion numbers. And in conjunction with the FDA's decision to extend the period of time under which you can legally use RU46, I think you're going to find the incident rate of adverse effects increasing in the state of Idaho. I don't think there's any, I have little doubt in my mind about that. And in fact, I just would point out the data we cite in here from the FDA's adverse reactions report is dated 2011, meaning that is the last available data reported by the FDA on adverse reactions associated with the use of RU46 for chemical abortions. That is a substantial period of time at which the data is essentially unknown to the public or to policymakers such as this committee.
Further questions? Representative Harris.
I guess maybe a follow on to that last question, then help us come to the yes answer you're looking for. How would this passage of this bill not inversely affect the health of women, either in the limited scope or in a broader scope that you hope to accomplish?
Mr. Ripley.
Mr. Chairman, I can give you certain arguments for why we should pass this legislation, which is why I'm here. I cannot argue one of those reasons is not improving the health outcomes for women and girls in the state of Idaho. The situation we face at the moment is poor, and our options are to not pass this legislation, allow the lawsuit to run its course, which will be a matter of weeks, I would imagine, in which the district court judge will rule that House Bill 154, the ban on telemed abortions, is unconstitutional, and award attorney's fees to the plaintiff, Planned Parenthood, which will make it much more difficult for us to deal with this issue in the future. That such a finding by the court, a final ruling that it is unconstitutional, also represents a threat to those 16 states that have bans on telemed abortions operating today. Hence, the painful duty of coming to this committee and asking for your vote on this bill as a better course of action, again, to minimize the damage legally speaking, so that we can deal with this issue again, I hope.
Representative Harris.
So to rephrase just a second, maybe what you're saying, not to put words in your mouth, I'm afraid, but so the long-term outcome of this action is beneficial to the health and welfare of women and children in that it would not set a precedent, would not create a Supreme Court case law, it would not immediately affect 16 other states in a similar circumstance. Would that be fair?
Mr. Chairman,
Ripley.
Representative, that is certainly a fair way to put it, particularly if you envision a scenario under which, let's say we get certain appointments on federal benches and we get certain changes in the environment in which we're working so that we have a reasonable chance of coming back on this legislation in a year or two or three. The difference between me standing here in front of this committee and asking for your vote without that district court precedent is of huge value to the people of Idaho. There's no doubt about that. And in that scenario, certainly it is to the benefit of women and girls and their health long-term, and to those babies at risk with increased chemical abortion use, that this legislation pass. In the short term, as uncomfortable as this is, you need to appreciate, I think, that this legislation is not in effect. It was actually in effect for something like 6 months, during the end of the second half of 2015. Telemed abortions have been legalized in the state of Idaho by the signature of the Attorney General back in the spring of 2016. And again, I want to emphasize that based upon the record that is now in front of the court, there is zero possibility that the state could prevail in defending the statute as the case sits today.
Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Ripley. Misty Tolman.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Misty Tolman. I'm the Legislative Director for Planned Parenthood. I'm here to testify in partial support for House Bill 250 regarding telemedicine and medication abortion, or chemical abortion as it's referred to in this legislation. At Planned Parenthood, we work every day to make sure women receive the high-quality care they need in a safe, respectful environment. That includes safe legal abortion. Our patient care assures women have safe, compassionate, respectful care, as well as education, support, and counseling. This assures that every patient has the ability to make personal, private pregnancy decisions that are in the best interest of herself and her family. We thank the committee for introducing this bill to change the unconstitutional restrictions on access to telemedicine abortion. Ultimately, the effect of this bill is to undo medically unnecessary restrictions identified by the Supreme Court of the United States as unconstitutionally burdensome. We do want to strenuously object to the legislative findings portion of the bill, most specifically the assertion that telemedicine abortion is in any way substandard. We all want women to have, sorry, I need to move this up so I can read it. We all want women in Idaho to have the safest, highest quality of care, and the care patients receive via telemedicine is as safe, effective, and satisfactory to a patient as if she received the care in person. A woman receiving care at a health center via telehealth is counseled and examined in person by medical professionals who are also present while she interacts with the physician via video technology, and then, under the physician's observation, takes the first medication. The telehealth law recognizes all the benefits that telemedicine confers to people living in Idaho and permits physicians to treat patients and prescribe medications using interactive video conferencing. And with the passage of this legislation, a medication abortion will no longer be inappropriately excluded from that care. We urge you to change the legislative findings to reflect that access to telemedicine for medication abortion is not only not substandard care, but in many cases it increases the quality of care by providing more timely access to safe legal medication abortion. We'd also like to speak to the legislative finding in Section 1, subsection 6, that refers to Planned Parenthood's testimony in 2015 that our organization was not providing medication abortion and did not intend to do so. Because the legal landscape changed shortly after the passing of that bill, and because we're always looking for ways to expand access to the quality care our patients need and that we can provide, we decided to file suit and launch services once the court enjoined enforcement. In closing, we thank you for reversing this unconstitutional and medically unnecessary restriction on women's access to medication abortion. and we urge you to change the legislative findings to accurately reflect the increased quality of care provided through telemedicine access to medication abortion as reported in the stipulated facts of the court case that led to the development of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in House Bill 250 this morning, and I have my remarks if you'd like them.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Misty. So could you go over with me again? I think I heard you say in your opening testimony that you are in partial support. Could you show me the areas where you are not in support of the legislation, specifically page and line numbers?
I don't have the bill in front of me. I'm sorry. Chairman Lurcher, Representative Crane, I'm sorry I don't have the bill in front of me, but we do strongly object to the legislative findings, specifically the legislative findings that indicate that telemedicine abortion is unsafe.